Thank you to all the soldiers who demonstrated outstanding military operations and participated in the battle at Avdiivka under his command. To avoid encirclement, we decided to withdraw to another line of defense. This does not mean we are retreating. Rather, it signifies a strategic move. Despite Russia capturing some territory, they have not achieved a decisive victory. This outcome at Avdiivka marks a new victory for the Russian armed forces, coming 2 years after the outbreak of the largest conflict in Europe since World War II. However, the war has not ended, and there are still questions about the strategic importance of Avdiivka, the effectiveness of the Russian forces, and whether their setbacks signal the beginning of the end for this conflict. Today's video will address these uncertainties, especially concerning the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. There are still too many unknowns, so don't hesitate to subscribe and click the bell button to receive the latest updates. Now, let's delve into the main content. Discussing Avdiivka, you may not know that this city in Donetsk province serves as a gateway to the larger region. Located about 15 kilometers south of Donetsk, Avdiivka boasts beautiful terrain, but was not focused on residential development during the Soviet Union. Instead, its emphasis was on the mining and chemical industries, quickly establishing itself as an important city contributing significantly to the Soviet Union's achievements. Even after Ukraine's separation from the Soviet Union, Avdiivka's role remained significant. However, after a series of destabilizing events, the outbreak of civil war in Ukraine in 2014 led to a standoff between Ukrainian government troops and pro-Russian factions. Starting from April 2014, the pro-Russian faction captured Avdiivka, along with some other towns in Donetsk province. However, they quickly lost control to their opponents, and the fighting persisted. By 2018, much of the city was destroyed, making access to electricity and heating networks extremely challenging. To this day, it's clear that the events unfolding here were just the beginning. In February 2022, Russia officially initiated what they termed a special military campaign into Ukrainian territory. A week before the escalation of conflict, the military and governmental authorities in Kyiv were ordered to strengthen forces and reinforce defenses. This was despite statements from both the Zelensky government and Moscow, which implied that the possibility of a conflict escalating with Russia's direct involvement was merely an exaggerated and provocative move by the West. When the Russian forces attacked on October 21, 2022, they utilized conventional weapons as well as thermobaric munitions, which are notably powerful. However, they could not dislodge the Ukrainian garrison from the city. Russian officials described Avdiivka as a fortress, fortified with a network of hidden concrete bunkers. They stated that the Ukrainian defenders often concealed themselves within residential buildings, making it difficult for Russian forces to advance without incurring significant losses. Moreover, Ukrainian soldiers utilized a coke plant for weapon storage. Compared to the initial stages of the war, the focus on Avdiivka had been on breaches around Kharkiv and some areas in southeast Ukraine. The situation in Avdiivka in the early stages of the conflict was tense, but the city was expected to face a major attack due to its strategic and logistical importance to Moscow. The capture of Avdiivka would solidify the battlefronts to the Donetsk region. Ukraine faced difficulties in regaining control of the regional capital, but had to brace for October 2022 after the annexation of Donetsk, Luhansk, and Zaporizhzhia, which intensified Moscow's aggression on the battlefield. Avdiivka's significance was heightened, attracting many elite units and modern military equipment. Now let's take a few moments to highlight some key figures primarily involved in the fire. Starting from April 2014, the pro-Russian faction captured Avdiivka, along with some other towns in Donetsk province. However, they quickly lost control to their opponents, and the fighting persisted. By 2018, much of the city was destroyed, making access to electricity and heating networks extremely challenging. To this day, it's clear that the events unfolding here were just the beginning. In February 2022, Russia officially initiated what they termed a special military campaign into Ukrainian territory. A week before the escalation of conflict, the military and governmental authorities in Kyiv were ordered to strengthen forces and reinforce defenses. This was despite statements from both the Zelensky government and Moscow, which implied that the possibility of a conflict escalating with Russia's direct involvement was merely an exaggerated and provocative move by the West. When the Russian forces attacked on October 21, 2022, they utilized conventional weapons as well as thermobaric munitions, which are notably powerful. However, they could not dislodge the Ukrainian garrison from the city. Russian officials described Avdiivka as a fortress, fortified with a network of hidden concrete bunkers. They stated that the Ukrainian defenders often concealed themselves within residential buildings, making it difficult for Russian forces to advance without incurring significant losses. Moreover, Ukrainian soldiers utilized a coke plant for weapon storage. Compared to the initial stages of the war, the focus on Avdiivka had been on breaches around Kharkiv and some areas in southeast Ukraine. The situation in Avdiivka in the early stages of the conflict was tense, but the city was expected to face a major attack due to its strategic and logistical importance to Moscow. The capture of Avdiivka would solidify the battlefronts to the Donetsk region. Ukraine faced difficulties in regaining control of the regional capital, but had to brace for October 2022, after the annexation of Donetsk, Luhansk, and Zaporizhzhia, which intensified Moscow's aggression on the battlefield. Avdiivka's significance was heightened, attracting many elite units and modern military equipment. Now let's take a few moments to highlight some key figures primarily involved in the battle. In the attack from the Russian side, the forces comprised soldiers from a variety of units such as the 15th Guards Mechanized Infantry Brigade, the 21st Independent Mechanized Infantry Brigade No. 74, formerly known as the Mechanical Rifle Division, and the elite 94th Guards Brigade from the Soviet era, alongside the 55th Infantry Brigade. Additionally, the 80th Guards Tank Regiment, the 239th and 10th Tank Regiments, and several engineering groups from the 8th Guards Army were involved. Units that previously belonged to Eastern separatist forces, such as the 1st and 9th Independent Guard Mechanized Infantry Brigades and numbers 110 and 114, were also deployed. The Russian side further deployed several reconnaissance battalions and employed tactics involving soldiers who were former members of private military companies. On the Ukrainian side, the defense was significantly challenged, partly due to the destructive impact of Russian strikes on infrastructure and roads. Another reason cited by the government of Mr. Zelensky was the delay and lack of consistency from the West in providing military aid packages. Nonetheless, the units deployed by the Ukrainian armed forces in Avdiivka were among the elite and performed commendably on the battlefield. Notably, the 110th Independent Mechanized Brigade played a pivotal role in the defense system of Avdiivka from the early days of the conflict. The 47th Independent Mechanized Brigade was known for possessing a significant number of M2 Bradley and Leopard vehicles received from the West. However, a majority of these combat vehicles suffered heavy losses during counterattacks in October 2023 in the direction of Toretsk due to mines and anti-tank weapons of the Russian army. The 3rd Assault Brigade, known for its members primarily from the controversial Azov movement, famed for their extreme levels of bravery and radical thoughts, also played a crucial role. The Independent Artillery Brigades No. 43 and No. 55 were positioned advantageously before the war entered a more intense phase. Their artillery was strategically placed in positions with optimal coverage capabilities. Supporting the defense were units from the 1st Independent Tank Group and the Independent Mechanized Brigades No. 53 and No. 57. After several probing attacks, by the final months of 2022, Russian forces began to concentrate their efforts towards Avdiivka, led by Russia's 1st Independent Guard Mechanized Brigade, signaling a critical phase in the ongoing conflict. After being captured, the forces on the Opitin side of the western Donetsk were ordered to assault the Avdiivka division, equipped with T-72 tanks and self-propelled 2S artillery along the border. Faced with fierce resistance, the enemy soldiers belonging to Ukraine's 53rd Mechanized Brigade were supported by artillery from Brigade No. 55. Despite the route being fortified by the opponent in advance, the 1st Russian Mechanized Group initiated their advance, but suffered losses. However, the attack continued into 2023, with Russia launching airstrikes on Avdiivka. Despite enhanced air defense capabilities, the first wave of attacks proved too overwhelming due to the destructive power and accuracy of the opponent, causing significant damage to Ukraine's defense lines. Ukrainian infrastructure was nearly completely destroyed, followed by the Russian army's gradual control over several surrounding villages and towns like Krasnohorivka, Stepov, and Vodiano. By March 2023, Ukrainian officials and soldiers acknowledged that the intensity of the fighting in Avdiivka was comparable to or exceeded that in Bakhmut. Despite this, Russian assessments indicated that the damage to enemy positions extended beyond high-rise buildings. Ukrainian forces remained entrenched in highly durable concrete fortifications, with underground bunkers and tunnels facilitating tank movement. The total number of Ukrainian troops in these fortifications reached approximately 25,000, making the Russian invasion challenging despite substantial support. In the following months, Russia began deploying advanced tank units to the area. Ukrainian countermeasures using small attack UAVs proved ineffective due to adverse weather conditions, yet they still inflicted considerable damage on Russian armored forces entering Nevel and Pivnishne. Continuous fighting and shelling persisted in Avdiivka. By June 2023, as the Russian army captured more critical positions, the pressure on Ukrainian soldiers in the city intensified. Efforts to relieve this pressure included missile attacks from Atak-MS and Su-24 and Su-27 aircraft on Russian positions in Sevastopol. By October 2023, the Russian determination to occupy the city escalated, leading to increasingly intense skirmishes in Avdiivka. Russian troop movements accelerated, giving them a strategic advantage. This marked the first deployment of a new Russian attack formation centered around a heavy armored unit entering the city. Soldiers from 3 motorized divisions of Russia's 8th Army Group coordinated attacks around Avdiivka with the support of artillery, including HS-1 Gvozdika and HS-3 Akatsiya systems, along with missile strikes. Units with backgrounds from the separatist forces in eastern Ukraine played a key role in multi-unit shock attacks on infantry positions, with continuous transportation of troops into the battlefield using BTR-90 and BMD-3 vehicles, deeply encroaching into the city. By the 1st of November, this Russian attack force was reported to number 40,000. On the Ukrainian side, 2 air assault brigades, numbers 47 and 53, were deployed to alleviate the military defense pressure on the 110th Brigade at the chemical plant and Avdiivka coke plant. On October 15th, the Ukrainian forces launched a counterattack targeting the flank of the Russian forces. Despite encountering significant resistance and sustaining damage to their main battle tanks and other mechanized assets, the Russian forces continued their assaults to breach the enemy's fortifications. They even dug 110-meter-long tunnels under Ukrainian defenses for planting explosives. By October 18th, Russian infantry brigades moved towards the coal plant and chemical facilities in Avdiivka, securing strategic points in the north. With support from the 1st Independent Guard Infantry Brigade, a group of Russian strikers targeted a defense base, originally an abandoned restaurant south of the city, while the 114th Motorized Rifle Brigade and the 277th Infantry Battalion pressed from the north. The 21st Mechanized Infantry Brigade also launched a swift attack on northwestern defensive positions of the city. As the month progressed, reserve units from Russia's 41st Army were kept in readiness, and both sides engaged in intense combat within the confines of narrow tunnels until the end of October 2023, when the pace of battle slowed due to adverse weather conditions. By November 2nd, Russian forces neared the western outskirts of Avdiivka. The Ukrainian General Staff reported repelling 17 attacks on Avdiivka and its surroundings. However, by November 4th, Russian control extended along the northern railway line leading to the coal plant. From November 9th to 11, Russian armed forces, supported by artillery, UAVs, and air forces, made significant advances. On November 12th, Ukrainian forces reported 30 clashes in and around Avdiivka, with an increase in precision-guided airstrikes and artillery rounds. The next day, Russian forces entered the industrial park on Avdiivka's southern slope, capturing at least 60% of it after 4 days of combat, despite continued Ukrainian defense. By November 22nd, Russian sources claimed to have captured Ukrainian defensive fortifications in the southwest of the industrial park, although counterattacks by the Ukrainian forces resulted in heavy casualties without significant success in regaining control. By November 25th, it was reported that most areas around the railways and the industrial park, including the coke factory and chemical plants, had fallen under Russian control. These sites faced regular bombardment, allowing Russian armored vehicles and tanks to operate freely and target any remaining Ukrainian defensive positions. On November 28th, the Russian forces launched a coordinated attack from all sides on Avdiivka, targeting the coke factory, which was a significant achievement of the Soviet Union, ultimately leading to its complete destruction. This maneuver allowed Russian mobile units to advance, leveraging their overwhelming numbers at strategic points against the opposition and focusing on the industrial zone. By December 4th, the Russian army began to consolidate positions it had captured over the past 2 months, turning its focus on strengthening defensive lines previously held by Ukrainian forces. On December 17, 2023, 2 Russian armored convoys attempted to penetrate Avdiivka from the south, but were ambushed, resulting in many vehicles being destroyed by mines. Despite this setback, the Russian forces did not suffer significant personnel losses. Throughout this period, the Ukrainian armed forces managed to maintain their supply lines to Avdiivka despite facing challenging weather conditions and continuous enemy airstrikes. However, the overall situation on the battlefield was dire, with Ukrainian military lines significantly weakened and shortages in ammunition becoming a critical issue, even as they still had access to 155mm artillery and anti-aircraft weapons. As 2024 began, the intensity of Russian attacks started to decrease, indicating a shift in tactics. The Russian forces began to attack from the south and east, with mechanized and armored units looking for opportunities to breach Ukrainian lines. Airstrikes with incendiary and guided bombs were temporarily reduced in favor of rocket and artillery fire. By January 20, 2024, Russian forces, primarily from the 1st, 44th, and 55th Mechanized Tank Brigades, had breached Ukrainian defenses in the south of Avdiivka, capturing fortified positions and advancing 1.2 kilometers northward, utilizing detailed intelligence from their engineering units. Special Forces units quickly cleared broken metal drainage lines, allowing Russian troops to penetrate deep behind Ukrainian lines and capture fortifications. On January 25, 2024, the 110th Ukrainian Brigade found itself struggling to repel Russian advances into the city center. Attempts at counterattacks to reclaim lost positions were unsuccessful. By early February 2024, Russian forces made further breakthroughs to the south and initiated a second push north of Avdiivka, focusing on severing enemy supply lines to the north and reinforcing their positions to the west of the railway, deploying more armored vehicles and advancing to the southwest of the city. By February 13th, some units of the 110th Ukrainian Brigade were ordered to withdraw from Avdiivka due to their inability to defend the city effectively. KF officers reported that their forces ran out of ammunition on February 16th, as the Russian army advanced along the southeast, with continued clashes in the northeastern part of Avdiivka, particularly fierce fighting in the industrial park. By evening, Russian forces had captured the city park and hospital, claiming up to 5,000 Ukrainian troops remained in the city, which was nearly surrounded. Despite the dire situation, the 3rd Ukrainian Brigade launched desperate attacks, inflicting heavy casualties on the Russian 114th Mechanized Infantry Brigade. In the early hours of February 17, 2024, Kyiv officials confirmed Ukrainian troops were withdrawing from Avdiivka via routes deemed safer to avoid encirclement and to preserve military personnel's lives and health. Several Ukrainian troops were captured during the withdrawal, with Russian flags being raised throughout the city. President Putin congratulated the Russian forces on completing their mission, marking Avdiivka's capture as a significant victory and possibly a future model for military operations, demonstrating superiority in artillery and air power. This victory is symbolic for Russia against Ukrainian armed forces, representing the largest attack since capturing Bakhmut in May 2023. The defense of Avdiivka highlighted several challenges for the Ukrainian side, including logistical difficulties and the daunting task of replenishing forces. For Russia, the capture of Avdiivka holds strategic, tactical, and political significance, enhancing the prestige of Moscow's ruling elite. Conversely, for Ukraine, it represents a significant loss, increasing pressure across most front lines. This development might signal a phase towards the end of Europe's largest conflict since World War II, potentially leading to unfavorable negotiations for Ukraine and President Zelensky's administration. However, it suggested that Ukraine may still have unrevealed strategies, indicating that the conflict could enter an even more intense phase. Please share your thoughts in the comment section below. Goodbye, and see you in the next videos. Have a great day, everyone.